So we have here Alicia Couri. And, when we had the good fortune of being able to have a conversation a few weeks back, I just found your story so compelling, which is why I thought it would be such a blessing to my audience here to have you on. Because, the interesting thing, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, is people tend to treat their bodies as completely separate from their mind. Like it's almost like we're these heads that just have these bodies attached, and that the neck doesn't exist. There's no connection between our mind and our body. And so why don't you start us off? Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your story about your son, because it really blew me away. So start us.
Thank you. So my name's Alicia Couri. I am a 53-year-old woman, just so you know, right now.
Day over 30.
Thank you. And I have 3 children. And some of the things you talked about earlier with, when doctors say at a certain age, you won't be able, or it'll be difficult for you to get pregnant. I had that told to me as a teenager. They did some blood work with me one time, and they said that my progesterone was high, so I may have difficulty getting pregnant. So that was implanted in my subconscious, that I'm going to have trouble getting pregnant. And also, I did not want to get pregnant early in my life. So I got married really early. I got married at 21, but I didn't want to get pregnant yet. So I bought the book. I remember reading this book, How Not to Get Pregnant, because I'm like, I don't want to be pregnant. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to be a oops accident. I was very purposeful and mindful in how I was approaching. And then when I was ready to start a family, I was very purposeful in that too.
And that's interesting. I love how you really point out that there was this bug in your ear saying, from a very young age, that Alicia, it may be difficult for you to get pregnant. Did you ever think about that again, or was it
all the time? Even when I was trying, when we finally made the decision to have our first child, I read all the things of how to get pregnant, what to do, because I already read the book on how not to get pregnant. So now I had to read books on how to get pregnant, right? I had to undo what I put in my head. So I had to read books on, how to make, when you're fertile, what to look for, what signs to look for, when you have sex, what to do so that you don't, so that you can have a higher potential of getting pregnant. So I did all the things, right? I did all the things. And it still took me like about 6 months, which for some women, that seems like, oh, please, 6 months, that's nothing. But, thinking that it would be like this, because it should be, what was, again, playing in my head, well, it's going to take us a while to do this. So it took about 6 months, 4 to 6 months, I think, for me to get pregnant. And I was over the moon, excited when I got pregnant. I was thrilled to tell the family about it. Everything was wonderful until it wasn't. I didn't expect my morning sickness to be as severe as it was after 3 weeks. And that got really severe. I was only 98 pounds at the time. And like it was morning, noon, and night. I couldn't eat. Everything I ate was like I didn't actually throw up, but I was dry heaving everything. I couldn't swallow. I couldn't swallow my own saliva. I couldn't I couldn't sleep because it was just a nightmare, right? So here I am thinking, well, the doctor said 12 weeks, morning sickness should stop. So I said, okay, I could survive to 12 weeks. And after 12 weeks, it didn't stop. And at the time I had a gynecologist, because I kept losing weight. I was eating, but the dry heaves, the nausea, the extreme nausea, the dry heaves made it very difficult to eat. But I was trying to eat as best as I could. And I had this gynecologist tell me, because I was losing weight, I was down to 92 pounds after 3 months, 4 months. And he said, oh, you're trying to keep your girlish figure and you're starving your baby. You need to eat. And my husband turned to him and said, listen, our food bill is like $1,200 a month. She is eating. She's just not gaining weight. She is just so sick all day long, all night long, that it's hard for her to eat, but she is eating. And then they sent me to a nutritionist who helped me. And I ended up putting on about 20 pounds. I was 112 pounds when I gave birth. So,
112 pounds wet, I'm sure.
112 pounds. And it was, I mean, I was skin and bones. I really was. It was really difficult. It was a very difficult time for me. And having experienced that for the very first time in my life, it created a lot of fear because and anxiety over ever getting pregnant again. It was all day, all night until I gave birth. Until the next day after I gave birth, did I start feeling like myself again. And so, I don't know. I was like, this is hard. I don't know if I could do this again.
Well, isn't it interesting how, the subconscious mind sometimes takes things quite literally, right? It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Right. If it's not hard for you to get pregnant, it can be hard for you to be pregnant, because you'll hear it's going to be hard. And I'm sure you've heard this as well, is that when we are conditioned to think that something's going to be hard, we'll make it hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not like anyone would ask, right? Not like anyone would ask for that, but it's an interesting thing. Our minds are powerful. Well, so tell us a little bit about, how this impacted your future family. Like, did you have more kids? Like what?
Well, yeah, I'm again, when my daughter was about 2, I thought, because I knew I wanted more children. I didn't want one child. That was one thing. I said, I don't want one child. I want more children. I was just approaching 30, or I was 30. And I said, I was approaching 30. And I said, you know what? I definitely want to have another baby. I don't want too much time to go by. And so let's try again. But before we even got to that place, I needed to emotionally recover. I needed to find ways to recover. And I was going to a really great church. They had a women's group called Miracle Mommies, of women who wanted to get pregnant and were having trouble getting pregnant. So I joined that group. I was the youngest in the group. Like I said, I was like 29 years old. I was the youngest person in the group, and didn't have the health issues that the others had. But I knew before I even knew about mindset and all, I knew it was in my head. I knew that there was something in there, that fear that was preventing me from even like I wanted it, but I was petrified of going through the same experience. So I said, I need some support in this. I need to know the word. I need to dive into get into the word on healing and health and pregnancy and delivery and all of it. And there was this amazing book. It's called, what is the book called? It's by, oh gosh, I'll remember the name. David does this. I'll remember the name. It'll come to me. Mm-hmm. But she wrote this book, and I read this book, and it was so amazing how she talked about God's plan for babies, God's plan for our bodies, for women, and even about labor and delivery, how our bodies were created to go through labor and delivery, and it's not supposed to be painful because it's just muscle contractions. And when you're building muscle and you're contracting it, there's no pain there. So why do we associate pain, this this excruciating pain with childbirth. It's because we've been conditioned to associate this pain with childbirth. So if we could change the way we look at it and just think about the muscles contracting and relaxing, our childbirth will be infinitely smoother and we'll experience less pain. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I started, but so I went to the classes, I read the book, I did all the things, and I said, okay, I'm going to get pregnant. Let's get pregnant again. We got pregnant again, and the same thing happened. I was sick the entire time, but I wasn't in despair. Like the first time I was sick in despair, like I would be crying every day. I'd be so broken up about it. This time I had tools, like I knew what the nutritionist said. So I put that into action so that I didn't start losing weight. I didn't lose weight. I gained weight. You know, the pregnancy was a healthier pregnancy, even though I was still as sick as I was the first time around, but I could endure it. It was less traumatic to me. It was still bad. It was still horrible, but I knew what to expect. And I went through it with a lot more grace. So when I found out in the ultrasound there was another girl, I was like, oh, dang it. I have to go through this another time because I really want a boy. Really. And I've told her this story. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this again. So I started preparing myself while I was still pregnant with my daughter that I'm going to have to do this again. So that was, and she was a dream. I mean, my labor and delivery was quick, boom. I can say that originally through the labor, the pain was there. The excruciating pain had started. And then I remembered reading what I did in the book, and I went into a meditative state. And I just started to really, I believe in praying in the Holy Ghost. So I was praying in the Holy Ghost, I was meditating, and that excruciating pain was not like, I knew my body was going through it. I felt the contractions, but I wasn't in that pain anymore. And so much so that the nurse, like my eyes were closed and I was just breathing normally. The nurse thought I was asleep, and she thought that I wasn't having contractions. She never checked me. And I opened my eyes at one point and I said, I need to go to the bathroom. And my husband said, okay, let me find out if you can go, and call the nurse over the intercom. And she's like, yeah, just make sure you take the IV, take the thing with her as she's getting out of the bed, and walk her to the bathroom. And my nurse that prepped me and everything that started, but she went to deliver another baby, came back, and she was like, wait, what do you need to go to the bathroom and do? What does it feel like? She said 1 or 2. I said 2. She's like, no, stop, don't go anywhere. And she rushed into the room and she checked, and the head was coming out. Like my daughter's head. I was in such a meditative state. My daughter started coming out, and I felt like I needed to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't. It was her breaching. So she was like, call the doctor in, get him to come in now, tell him it's an emergency. And she started fully pulling all the things together and stuff with her hand holding my daughter back from coming out. She's like, don't push. I'm like, I'm not pushing, my body is just doing it. I can't. So that was miraculous in itself, how that whole labor and delivery went.
That's incredible. I mean, the idea that what a really interesting illustration of, in that moment, remembering something. I mean, that's another indicator of how strong our subconscious mind, and grace. Think about, how would you have gone back to that one bit of information in that moment? You could have been thinking about terrible things, the worst case scenario, none of this works, but you went back to what, this is why there's an old saying, we don't fall, back. It was something like, we don't fall back on our, like it's our high, I don't know how it goes. It was something like we fall back on our training is basically what it is. When you
like
do
muscle memory, right? You just,
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's like we don't fall back on our aspiration, we fall back on our training. It's something to that nature.
Something
So
like that. Mhm.
we're aspiring to be our best selves, but we go back to what we know. So when you
Yep.
have learned something and you've taken it on board, you have this toolkit that miraculously,
It's
right
just
when
like,
right when you
yep.
needed it, you pulled it
Because
out.
I really thought I couldn't do this. It was like I was feeling it. I was feeling the pain. My toes were curling. My whole body was tensing. And I'm like, no, this is not going to go well if you keep doing this. So
Well,
the
and
book is Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize.
okay, supernatural childbirth. I know everyone heard that and they're like, we want to fall asleep during our birth, right? We want to fall asleep and get into
We
this
want to be in a
meditative state.
meditative state.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really brilliant. Not only that work exists, but that you were able to call upon it and you made a decision in that moment
Absolutely.
to fall back on your training.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
Wow.
just breathe through it. And it was only 4 hours. It's 4-hour labor, and she came out in 2 pushes. It was like boom, boom, and she was
Yeah.
out.
And this stands for the proposition. I mean, we hear people do incredible things like, healing, what you're talking about here, this meditative childbirth. I've even heard of people going into surgery without anesthesia
Mm-hmm.
because of being able to tap into that mind-body connection and take control and really harness their fear, because that's actually what you're talking about. Because it would have been really easy for you to slip back into fear
Mm-hmm.
and have a completely different experience.
Yeah.
How has that shown up in your life in other ways?
The former or the latter? Like,
All of it. I have a feeling, woman, that you are very tapped in. You're very tapped in. You know how to manifest like a mofo, right? I mean, I see that in you, and I'm just curious, like how that shows up in other aspects of your life.
well, in manifesting the house that we live in now, that was part of, we have the same mentor, going to one of his courses, and him talking about the reason. This was really powerful, and my coach reminded me of it recently. She's like, the reason you don't have what it is that you desire right now is because there is something else that is more important, that has, something to that effect. Of course, I'm paraphrasing, but you have this desire and you're saying you want this, but there's something that is taking precedent over that thing that you're not recognizing. And for years and years and years, I had been wanting a house, wanting this house, wanting a house, wanting a house. And I actually put it on a vision board. And later on, I realized it's the same, this same house model. I don't know if it's the exact same house, but it's the same house model that was on my vision board a year prior to it. And when he had said that there's something more important that is superseding the thing that you say you want, I started thinking, she's like, value. You value that more than you value the thing that you desire. That's what it was. And I started thinking, and where we were living, even though it wasn't ideal, because we were a family of 5, we were in a 2-bedroom, we needed a house, and children were growing and stuff. And I really valued the district we were in, the school district. There were no houses that I liked in the area. So every time we looked, we would have to look outside of the area. And that kept me from pushing forward. And I didn't realize that until he said that. And I was like, what am I valuing? Our church was like 2 minutes away. The school was 5 minutes away. Everything was so centrally located for us. And that's what I was valuing more than actually moving into the house that I wanted. And once I cleared that away, and I cleared this other idea that you feel like the house has to come to you in a very specific way. Get rid of that. Like, get rid of the idea that how it has to come to you, and just allow it to come to you. So, yeah. So there are other things that I had to clear out, recognize what was happening and clear it out.
Dropping bombs here, woman, because it's so true. It is so true. You have to ask yourself, what is it that I am valuing? Because you're absolutely right. If something is not coming in, like, prime example, when I was trying to conceive our son, like you was told, it's a different, you know my story. So it's a very different scenario, but I was told it was going to be hard. So it was hard.
You valued hard, right?
Yeah. And I also was told that getting pregnant naturally was not a possibility for me. Like good luck, you're too old, you need a donor egg, all of this stuff. And I onboarded that. I never put that through a filter of whether or not I believe that truly.
Mm-hmm.
And the overachiever in me, the needing to, be the student, the top student, I'm going to follow the rules. Well, who was I to challenge that?
A doctor.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Doctor with all those degrees.
Yeah. And it's like, and it was funny because it wasn't until I opened myself up to the possibility of conceiving my son naturally, that this was a possibility, that I was open to any and all possibilities that were willing to show up, that he did show up. Mm-hmm. And I let go of the need to comply. I let go of so many things. And I valued, this is interesting, I valued what other people thought of me more than I valued what I knew to be true in my heart. I knew I could have my son. Yeah. I just didn't know how, right? And when we don't know how, which is to your point, it's confusing. And then we also kind of figure...
We default to what everybody says is how it's supposed to happen. We default to the experts, how it's supposed to happen, instead of just opening ourselves up for it happening. Right.
Or that it's going to happen in this traditional way, which is what you're saying, is like, be open, like, let all the hows go, because the how is irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that's so big.
It is powerful. I mean, well, and it's been for even us who, seep ourselves in this thought process and are very, educated on it, but it still is big.
It's still powerful. And we still need reminding of it. We still need to be reminded of it, because to your point earlier, we fall back into old thought processes and thought patterns very easily.
Yeah.
Very easily. So we have to be very conscious about what we're choosing to think, how we're choosing to think about things. So, yeah.
And so tell us more about this, because there's more
about my son, because this is my favorite story ever, because it's really a testament to the power of God and belief and everything that we've been talking about before. Because like I said, when I found out in the ultrasound that Brooke was a girl, I said, okay, I know I have to do this again. And that was the moment I made up my mind. I made that decision that this is going to happen again, and it's going to be a boy. Like I'm not leaving this up to chance anymore. That was the moment I knew I'm going to have a son. And so just like the first time that I dug into the Bible to find, all the scriptures on healing and all this stuff, This time I looked for all those scriptures that aligned with boys having a son. Hannah prayed for a son and God gave her a son. Abraham and Sarah had a boy, even in their old age, right? If it was possible for them, it's possible for me. And so, if she prayed for a boy, God granted her a boy, Isaiah, then I could pray for a boy and God is going to grant me a boy. So that was the first thing, is just embedding that. Then I knew that in order for that to manifest, I needed not just my belief to be in play, because when you're looking at spiritual authority, it has to like be surrounded. You have to be surrounded in it. So I didn't just need my belief. I needed to enroll everybody into the belief of it and speaking the right things. So it was one Christmas, my mother-in-law, I decided to give her a gift. And what I did was I created this photo album of all her grandchildren. And she only has one grandson and 9 granddaughters. And so I put a picture of my first daughter, Cassandra, as a baby, and then her at that time. Then I put a picture of my second daughter as a baby and at that time. And then I had a blank page with his name, with Elijah, because I love that name forever. I always loved that name, Elijah. I said, if I have a son, his name is going to be Elijah. So he already had a name. So I had put the name Elijah and some baby footprints. I had a little stamp with some baby footprints on that page. And then I did all the other kids, right? I did them all in the album. So I gave her that album because she's not a believer like I was. And I know she's very skeptical about everything. And so I gave her, the matriarch of the family, the album. And so for Christmas, she opened it up. She looked through it. Well, she hid it at first and we had to open your gift. So she opened it up and she looked at it and she's like, oh, how cute. And she turned to the page with Elijah and she looked at it. She's like, are you pregnant? I'm like, no, but if you see the footprints, Elijah is coming. So I had to plant that seed into the matriarch of the family that Elijah is coming. And so everybody started talking about Elijah coming. My 3-year-old daughter in pre-K, she drew a picture of our family. Like in pre-K, they had to draw pictures, and she drew Daddy and Mommy and Cassandra and Brooke, and then she drew this other little thing, body. And the teacher asked, well, who's that? She's like, that's my baby brother. That's Elijah. He's coming. And the teacher's like, oh, is your mom pregnant? She's like, not yet, but Elijah's coming. So like everybody was talking about Elijah coming, and everybody, I even had people who would tell me, oh, you can't believe for that. You can't believe for a son, you get what you get. I'm like, no, that's not true. I can, and I am. It's like, oh, I know of all these women who get pregnant and say, oh, I'm having a boy, and it doesn't, and it's, they get disappointed. And I'm like, no. You can't plant a seed after it's sown, right? You can't say this is going to be an apple tree after you've planted orange seeds. You have to plant the seed before it's sown. So I'm planting the seed before it's sown. And Elijah, he's not here yet because he's a very specific child that God is giving me. And I'm going to give him time to answer the call. I'm not going to rush this. I'm going to give him time to answer the call. And when it's time, I will be pregnant with Elijah, not before. So we were patient, and it took another 3 years, I think, from when I made the album, because it was 5 years, and from when I made that album. So all my children are 5 years apart, and they all came 4 weeks early. I don't know why. But when I made the album, to the time that I got pregnant with him, it was about 3 years. And then I got pregnant. And when I found out for sure I was pregnant, we were all in Orlando on vacation. I did the blood test. The doctor called me while I was over there, and I bought a little cup with his name on it and gave it to his grandmother, my mother-in-law, with his name on it, a little sippy cup. And she looked at the sippy cup and she's like, Elijah's here, isn't he? I'm like, yes, he is. So, yeah.
There were so many nuggets in that. Like, it is extraordinary. First of all, the audacity woman.
I know. Well, I'm the audacious confidence growth expert.
Well,
right?
I know. Yeah. I mean, it makes, it's perfect. It's perfectly you. But I think what you're demonstrating here in such a very clear way is, one, like, know what you want and be unapologetic about it.
And make a decision. Make the decision that is it,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was still kind of like in you manifesting the house. I'm like, all this stuff, it's just so good. And it's such rich ground that, like, you take all of this goodness and you're like drawing a line in the sand. I'm having my son.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think it really takes not only faith, but it's also a belief in yourself that is extraordinary to go and reveal to the people closest to you in your family that this is happening, right? Because most of us, we show a lot of shame about our desires. Instead of, you did the exact opposite in a really bold and beautiful way to reveal yourself as somebody who was believing for a son.
Mm-hmm. And, there are other things in that story that I had to go through because part of it, like in my prayer time, God had instructed me on certain things. So there was times I had to fast for it. There were times like I was instructed, and I know people might think I'm woo-woo about this, but the impression was put upon my heart to give up certain things. And so I said, I'm going to be obedient to that because I'm asking for something very specific. I am requesting something very, very specific. And so I am going to be obedient. So when I had the impression to give up, because I loved bacon, I loved me some bacon, and I loved shellfish. And my mother-in-law had asked me what I wanted for Christmas that day, which I wanted her to cook, and it had pork in it and it had crab in it. And the night before, I was impressed to stop eating shellfish and eating pork. And I know there were several reasons for that in hindsight. One is the obedience, but also to stand up to my mother-in-law. I had requested something of her, and now I have to go back to her in obedience to God and say to her, I can't eat what you prepared for me. I'm sorry. I can't eat it. I have to sanctify my body for Elijah. And so that was hard.
That took ovaries of titanium, woman.
That was hard. I mean, hard. Because she asked me what I wanted. I told her what she shopped for it. She cooked it. And here I am showing up the next day saying, I can't eat any of it. So that was hard. But it's also
you appear to be alive.
Yeah.
You survived that.
I survived that. But
Okay.
it was in obedience to the desire, right? It was in obedience to what it is I was asking for the universe to provide, for God to provide for me, Elijah. And so, I had to humble myself many times during this journey.
That's mind-blowing.
Oh my gosh.
But what a really interesting way to illustrate the point that when you are clear on what you want, and you're listening to the truth that's in your heart, you're obedient to the call, because we all have the ability to hear the call.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, the same thing, like when my husband and I made the decision that we were going to stop our treatment, like, I think he got there before I did, but there was this, and when he mentioned it to me, I think I fought him on it a little bit, but there was this overwhelming sense of peace that I was going to submit to that, that I was being asked to believe bigger, that I was being invited to believe at a level I had never believed, because at this point, it was me, it was my husband, and it was God. There was nobody else.
Nobody else.
Everybody else had tapped out.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else would be like, there's nothing here for you.
That's when they tell you in the Bible, you got to gird up your loins.
Yeah.
Gird them up.
You got to gird them up. Well, and then so Elijah arrived.
And I think, what was really special is I had asked the doctor if my children can be in the delivery room for it, because I also wanted my girls to not be afraid of childbirth.
Wow.
I didn't want them to have the experience of Hollywood of what childbirth is. I wanted to give them what childbirth could be. So they were right there, front and center, right in front, seeing it all.
Wow.
A
Wow.
5-year-old and a 10-year-old, right in front and center, watching their baby brother be born.
I mean, think about how intentional that is, Alicia. I mean, like, I'm blown away by so many aspects of this. The strength of character, the strength of faith, the foresight to be able to say, I'm choosing something different for my daughters. And you're willing to stand up to your mother-in-law, which would probably have 99% of us running in the opposite direction, right? Unless you had some whiskey on board. Like,
Right.
much like, that's a bridge I'm not going to cross, especially not on Christmas. Like,
On
seriously,
Christmas.
I mean, that was divine intervention that I think saved your ass right there. Is like that, if anyone needs proof of your higher power, this was it.
Right there.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, I was sweating bullets.
Yeah, I
right
think
over
you've got
there.
a whole new set of believers here, because people are like, wait a minute, I'm going to check her to see if she's got a pulse. She appears to have survived that interaction with her mother-in-law. So what would you say? I mean, I'm sure there's a host of other examples, but what you've shared with us here is so profound in such very tangible and human ways, whether it's the house, whether it's your children, whether it's overcoming insane morning sickness, calling in your boy. What would you want? Like, if you were going to basically, drill down and like maybe give us a few things for women who are struggling with their fertility, struggling to wrap their head around this whole mind-body thing, the faith thing even. What would you want them to know? I mean, as a gorgeous 53-year-old woman who has seen some stuff and has personally seen the power of manifestation and belief and the faith, what would you want them to know?
Can I share a scripture with you? Because
please.
And it's the premise of my whole show that you were a guest on. It's 3 John 2, where he says, "Beloved, I pray above all things that you be prosperous and be in health, even as your soul prospers." That is the mind, body, spirit connection. That scripture embraces all 3 parts of us. There's not one part that we have to leave, that we could leave out of that. He says, I pray above all things that you prosper and be in health. So when you're looking to get pregnant, that's your health. even as your soul prospers. That's the mind. So you have to understand what is manifesting in your mind. What is happening in that mind of yours? What are you thinking about in the depths of your despair? Because I had some deep despair when I was first pregnant with my son, and that morning sickness hit. There was a day that I just couldn't get out of bed, and I was crying. I was begging, I was pleading, and I was crying. And I said, God, I don't know if I can go through this again. I don't know if I have the strength to go through 9 months of this. This is hard. And I remember calling a friend and I said, I need you to pray for me, because I was like this close to thinking about abortion. I was this close to thinking I cannot make it through this. And I said, you prayed, you believed, and you received. Don't abandon your seed now. Don't abandon it. I had to stir myself up, not to abandon all the stuff that I did leading up to this moment. And I said, you can do this. You know, we have to stir it up inside of us sometimes. We need to call on a friend to pray for us, to hold us up in our moments of weakness, because we can't be strong 24/7. You know, there will be times that you will doubt, that you will be in despair, and you will feel hopeless. But just remember that, you know, you are strong enough to do this. And God would not put a desire in your heart that it's not meant to come through. So don't abandon your seed. Don't abandon it. You know, I think that's what I would tell anybody. Keep believing.
Yeah. Amen to all of that. You know, it's interesting to me. There was another point, because in that scripture you were talking about the mind and the body. But I think there's also a really powerful lesson about prosperity, meaning abundance, meaning no lack, no scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
I just want I'm like, she's again dropping bombs, but I'm like,
prosper.
yeah, but
Yes.
it's, you know, but when we think about prosperity, people immediately think it's only financial.
Money. Mm-hmm.
That's like the easy part. Like that's the easy piece because it's tangible. But when we're talking about real prosperity, we're talking about spiritual depth. We're talking about opportunity. We're talking about not believing in lack of any kind, not being confined by age, not being confined by past failures. It is true prosperity.
Hey, if Sarah could do it at 90, hello.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what's interesting about that, Alicia, though, is I think that, you know, we've been conditioned to separate our beliefs. You know, like we're taught, I think, to look at statistics and look at science, whatever, you know, like, I mean, science and faith are not mutually exclusive. I think, you know, people draw, you know, this unnecessary line between the two. But I think that science is enhanced by faith because you see it, you see the magic and the
tangibility of the thing you believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I really appreciate what you've shared here. I mean, there's so much richness that you've shared. And I just, you know, it was so amazing to be able to share in that with you and, you know, and hear this miraculous story. So how do women get in touch with you? How do women dig into your work? Because I've looked at your work. I'm like, there's a lot of cool stuff that you've got going on here. So how do women find you?
Thank you. So Alicia360.com is the easiest place to find me. All my social media links are there, plus my website. And you can text me, you can call me, you can book an appointment on my calendar, you can smoke signal me. Everything is right there on that site.
That's awesome. And we'll definitely be putting links to all of those in the show notes here. But, you know, I just wanted to thank you, Alicia. I think what comes through in everything that you do and everything that you've shared here is a deep and abiding conviction that's accessible to anyone if they're willing to tap into it. Because you speak about this with such authority and such peace. So thank you for sharing that with all of us here. And it's just such a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate you inviting me so much. Thank you, Roseanne. I don't often get, in the business arena, I don't often get an opportunity to talk about my story and how my children came into this world. And so I really, really, truly appreciate, and I'm humbled by the opportunity to share that.
Yeah, well, and I think it's really cool to show people that, as CEOs, like, we have a backstory. It's not just all business, and it's not just all books and all this other stuff.
We have a full story.
We got a whole story
and stuff going on.
Yeah. So thank you for being here with us, Alicia.
Thank you.
Love this episode of the Fearlessly Fertile podcast? Subscribe now and leave an awesome review. Remember, the desire in your heart to be a mom is there because it was meant for you. When it comes to your dreams, keep saying hell yes.